You ever feel like you're just constantly trying to catch up with AI? It moves so fast.
Oh, absolutely. Blink and there's a new model, a new technique.
Exactly. And you want to know what's actually important, right? Without getting totally bogged down in the technical weeds.
Well, that's the plan for today.
Yeah, welcome to this deep dive. We're zeroing in on DeepSeek R1. Heard a lot of buzz about this one.
That's right. It's been making some serious waves.
Hmm.
And we're not just talking theory. We're looking at how the team at thoughtbot actually used it,
Yeah.
connected it up with Ruby on Rails.
Okay, cool. And our main source here is an article they wrote, AI in Focus, Connecting DeepSeek to Rails. Sounds pretty practical.
Yeah, it's a good one. Very hands-on.
So our mission, if you will, is to unpack why DeepSeek R1 is getting so much attention, what makes it, different, and what it means practically, especially if you're working at that intersection of AI and software development.
Let's do it.
All right, so DeepSeek R1. What is the big deal? Why all the fuss?
Well, it's pretty interesting. The article actually mentions its release nudge to the stock market.
Really? For an
Okay.
AI model release, that's unusual.
It really is. It signals just how significant people in the tech world think this might be.
Mhm.
The key things about it are, it's what they call a reasoning model. And that term reasoning is important. We'll circle back to that.
Okay.
It also has open weights, which is a big plus. Performance is apparently high. And crucially, the hardware needed is, well, relatively low compared to some giants out there.
Okay, hold on. Open weights, high performance, and you don't need a data center in your basement to run it.
Kind of, yeah. That's the promise, more or less.
That does sound like a potent mix. How does that fit in, though? Most of the really powerful stuff we hear about seems locked away in big corporate labs, right? Closed source.
Exactly, and that's where DeepSeek R1 stands out. The current AI scene is, yeah, dominated by these closed proprietary models.
Hmm.
By releasing with open weights, DeepSeek R1 is part of this growing trend, a really important one, I think, towards more open, more accessible, cheaper AI. And crucially, AI you can run yourself, locally.
Locally.
Yeah, the thoughtbot piece definitely frames it that way. Sees it as another sign that AI is just going to keep getting faster, better, and hopefully more open over time.
Running AI locally, that's a concept that keeps popping up. The article mentions a tool, Ollama, for running DeepSeek R1 specifically.
Ollama. Think of it like a manager for running these large language models on your own machine.
Okay. And why is that a big deal for, say, a developer?
Well, it's about flexibility, really. Control.
Mhm.
Imagine you're building something. Being able to just swap out different AI models in your dev environment, test them side by side without needing an API key for everything or relying on external services. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I can see that. Saves time, maybe cost.
Definitely. And the article makes another key distinction here. It specifically calls models like DeepSeek R1 and, say, GPT-4 reasoning LLMs.
Mm.
It sets them apart from, the more standard LLMs we might have used before.
Reasoning LLMs? Okay, what's the difference there? And didn't you mention something about DeepSeek having some special feature like think tags?
Yes, that's one of the most interesting parts. So these think tags, DeepSeek R1 can actually include these in its output. They basically show you the model's step-by-step thought process as it works towards an answer.
Whoa, okay. So you don't just get the final result, you get the working out.
Exactly, like seeing its internal monologue. For developers, this is potentially huge. It gives you visibility into how the AI reached its conclusion.
Which makes debugging way easier, I bet. If you get a weird answer, you can see where it went off track.
Precisely.
Mm.
Understanding why it gave you that output helps so much when you're trying to figure out how to prompt it better or fix issues. It's a big step towards more explainable AI, at least during development.
Okay, that sounds genuinely useful. So let's talk about ThoughtBot's actual experiment. They used this in a Rails app. What was the setup?
Right. So they already had this internal Rails application. Inside it, they had a class called Summary Generator.
Okay.
And this class was initially set up to use a Llama model, another open-ish model running locally via Ollama, to generate summaries for their project management, I think.
Gotcha. So they were already doing local AI stuff.
They were. So to try out DeepSeek R1, first step was downloading it. They grabbed a 32 billion parameter version using Ollama. The article notes it was about 20 gigabits.
20 gigs. Okay. Manageable on a decent laptop these days.
Yeah, exactly. And Ollama handles the packaging, making it easier to just pull down and run, kind of like Docker simplifies running other software containers.
Right. Okay. So they have DeepSeek R1 downloaded via Ollama. How hard was it to actually, plug it into their Rails app instead of Llama?
This is where it gets quite impressive, actually. According to the article, it was surprisingly simple. Yeah. They had this prompt class already set up using the standard OpenAI Ruby client library to talk to the local model. To switch, they literally just changed one constant.
One line.
Basically, yeah. They changed model to model DeepSeek R1.32b.freeze. And they just had to make sure the all-host constant pointed to their local Ollama server, which is usually HTTP-127.0.1.111434.
Wow.
And because they already had a background job set up to use this summary generator for creating summaries of CRM opportunities, boom. That one change meant the next time the job ran, it used DeepSeek R1 instead of Llama.
That's incredibly smooth. It really shows the power of having that local setup and, I guess, good abstractions in your code.
Absolutely. It makes experimenting much, much easier.
So the big question, once they switched, how did DeepSeek R1 actually do? How did it compare to Llama for generating those CRM summaries?
Well, they're careful to say in the article this wasn't like a formal, rigorous benchmark. That might be something they do later.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Initial impressions.
Very positive, it seems. They said DeepSeek R1 performed at least as well as the Llama model they were using before.
At least as well as pretty good for a drop-in replacement.
Right. And they specifically mentioned it was accurate and they didn't see any signs of, hallucinations, the model making stuff up.
Okay.
And interestingly, they highlighted one specific area, summarizing the duration of projects that were running at the same time. Apparently, DeepSeek R1 handled that correctly, whereas the Llama model had sometimes struggled with that specific task.
Huh. That's a concrete win then, a specific area of improvement.
Seems like it, yeah, in that particular context.
This whole thing, better performance, running locally, maybe needing less heavy-duty hardware, it touches on those bigger conversations about AI, right? Like speed, cost, sustainability.
Absolutely. Models like DeepSeek R1, if they deliver on this promise of high performance without needing, planet-sized GPUs for every task, that feeds directly into those concerns.
Yeah, the energy consumption of AI is a huge topic.
It is. So making models more efficient, more accessible for local use. It could potentially lead to more sustainable patterns, less reliance on massive, centralized cloud infrastructure for everything. That has implications for cost too, of course.
It also seems like companies often dip their toes into AI with internal stuff first. The article mentions this idea of internal tools first. Why do you think that's such a common pattern?
Well, it makes a lot of sense from a risk perspective, doesn't it?
How so?
If you're automating an internal workflow or building a tool to help your own team analyze data or generate internal reports, the stakes are generally lower than if you're putting AI directly in front of your customers.
Right. Less can go wrong publicly.
Yeah, it's like you have more control, you understand the context better, there's maybe higher trust within the team using it, you can experiment, learn, build confidence with those internal use cases.
And then once you're comfortable, you think about customer-facing features.
That seems to be the natural progression, yeah. Start internally, prove the value, understand the quirks, and then think bigger.
The thoughtbot folks also played around a bit, didn't they? The article mentioned some other, maybe more fun experiments.
Yeah, they did. Testing the boundaries a bit. They asked it to translate an idiom, "It's raining cats and dogs," into Portuguese.
Oh, how did it do? Idioms are tricky.
It apparently reasoned its way through it, using those think tags, and came up with chovendo a pot, which literally means raining jars or buckets. It's a valid translation, though they noted it might be a bit regional. But the reasoning process was visible.
Cool. Well,
They also did the classic count the R's and strawberry test.
ah, yes, the LLM nemesis.
Kind of. And interestingly, even though they could see the reasoning steps in the think tags, the 32 billion parameter version they were running locally still got it wrong. It counted only 2 R's.
Even seeing the steps, it still made a mistake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A really important reminder. Precisely. It just hammers home that point. No matter how smart these models seem, no matter if they show you their thinking, you always need to verify the output. Human oversight is still absolutely critical. Don't just trust it blindly.
Yeah, that's maybe the most crucial takeaway. Don't get complacent. Okay, so wrapping this up, if someone listened to this whole deep dive, what are the 2 or 3 main things they should walk away with about DeepSeek R1 and this experiment?
I'd say number 1, DeepSeek R1 looked like a really interesting step towards more open, powerful, and importantly, locally runnable AI. That combination is key.
Okay, open, powerful, local.
Number 2, those think tags, the reasoning visibility, that's not just a gimmick. It offers genuine advantages for developers trying to understand, debug, and actually use these models effectively.
Right, the explainability aspect during development.
Exactly. And number 3, Early signs, like thoughtbot's experiment, suggest it performs well in practical tasks, potentially even improving on existing models in specific areas. But always with that caveat, verify the results.
Got it. It really does spark that aha moment, seeing how these advanced models are actually being integrated and what they might enable.
Yeah.
And thinking about that trend open, local AI,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What could this unlock for maybe smaller teams or individual developers, things that seemed impossible before because you needed massive resources?
That's the really exciting question, I think.
Yeah.
Does this start to democratize access to this level of AI capability beyond just the tech giants? What new kinds of apps or tools become feasible now?
Definitely food for thought. And if you are interested in following Thoughtbot's journey with this stuff, the article mentions they have an AI in Focus series. Might be worth checking out.
Could be, yeah. They seem to be doing some practical explorations.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thanks for breaking it all down.
My pleasure. Lots to keep an eye on.